It was a stormy night when everything changed. I stood in front of the old cracked mirror, wiping off the mist that clung to the glass. The rain beat against the windows, but it was the sudden silence in the room that unnerved me. The silence like a warning. I glanced at my reflection, but something didn't look right. The room was dark, lit only by the flickering candles. The shadows were long, stretching unnaturally across the walls. For a moment, I thought I was just imagining it. But then, my reflection, it moved. I froze. The figure in the mirror wasn't mimicking me anymore. It was doing something different, something I didn't do. I reached out a trembling hand to touch the glass, but the figure, my shadow, it turned its head, meeting my gaze. It wasn't me. It couldn't be. I backed away from the mirror, my heart pounding in my chest. The air felt heavier, suffocating. Then a voice, not mine, whispered in the darkness. "I've been waiting for this moment." I stumbled backward, my breath shallow as I struggled to make sense of what was happening. The voice had come from the reflection, but it was as if it was speaking directly into my mind. I spun around looking for the source, but the room was empty. The storm outside howled, rattling the windows, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog in my thoughts. This was impossible. My shadow, it was just a trick of the light, right? I forced myself to step closer to the mirror again, heart racing, hand trembling. The reflection, the one that wasn't mine, was still staring back at me with cold, calculating eyes. It took a step forward. I flinched, but the reflection didn't move. It was still, like a still lake. But then, without warning, it grinned. A smile that didn't belong to me. The eyes darkened, the smile stretched wider, and then it stepped out of the frame. I turned and ran, fear coursing through my veins, but I could hear its footsteps behind me, too perfectly timed to be my own. It was right there, in the hallway. My shadow, no longer confined to the floor, moved in a twisted, unnatural way, slithering along the walls, growing larger with every passing second. "Where are you going?" the voice mocked, echoing in my ears. "You can't escape me." I didn't know where to run. The house, once comforting, now felt like a labyrinth of darkness, trapping me in its suffocating grip. The hallway stretched endlessly, and no matter how fast I moved, my shadow, my reflection, was always just behind me. It was getting closer, and I could feel its weight pressing down on me, like a heavy, invisible hand wrapped around my throat. I could hear it whispering, taunting me, its voice like gravel scraping against my skin. "You never should have ignored me. Now I'm going to make you pay." I turned into the living room, desperate for an escape. But as I reached for the door, I felt something cold brush against my neck. A chill ran down my spine. I whipped around, but there was nothing there. Still, the feeling lingered, like something was watching me from the shadows. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The shadows twisted, crawling across the floor and up the walls, shifting in unnatural patterns. I could feel them closing in. My reflection was no longer just a reflection. It was in front of me now, its form taking shape in the darkness. "Run, and I'll follow," it whispered, the words dripping with malice. I stumbled backward, my mind racing, but it was too late. The shadow reached out, its fingers stretching toward me, its grip cold and suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was fight to survive. I wrenched myself free, my body crashing to the ground as I scrambled to my feet. My heart was a drumbeat in my ears, my breath ragged and desperate. The air felt thick, like I was wading through a fog of dread. I couldn't let it touch me. I couldn't let it take me. The shadow wasn't just following me anymore. It was hunting me. I bolted toward the back door, but it was locked. Panic gripped me as I fumbled with the key. The darkness behind me grew deeper, the room closing in like a vice. I could hear the whispering now, low and insistent, echoing off the walls, clawing at my sanity. "You can't escape yourself," it taunted, its voice growing louder, more insistent. "You've always been mine." The key finally clicked, and I wrenched the door open, slamming it behind me as I stumbled into the yard. The rain was pouring now, soaking me to the bone, but I didn't care. I ran, my feet slipping on the slick grass, my mind only focused on getting away. But the shadow was always there. It was in the trees, moving like a living thing, stretching across the ground, reaching out toward me. I could feel its eyes on me, burning into my back as I ran faster, my legs screaming in protest. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to keep moving. I had to escape. The darkness seemed endless. Every step I took felt like it was dragging me deeper into a nightmare I couldn't escape. My clothes clung to my skin, drenched from the rain, but the chill in the air didn't compare to the terror gnawing at my insides. I looked over my shoulder, half expecting the shadow to be right behind me. But there was nothing, just the endless stretch of the yard and the howling wind. I slowed, my breath coming in ragged gasps. It was too quiet now, too still. Then I saw it. In the distance, just at the edge of the trees, there was a figure, a silhouette against the darkened sky. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. Was it my shadow? It couldn't be. But as I stared at the figure, I could feel it pulling me in, drawing me toward it like a magnet. Without thinking, I walked forward, my feet moving on their own, as if the darkness had control of me. The figure in the trees was closer now, its outline sharper, and the whispering voice returned, now clearer than ever. You can't run from what's inside you. It will always find you. I wanted to scream, but the words caught in my throat. The figure stepped forward, revealing a face. My face. But it wasn't mine. It was twisted, its eyes hollow and void of life, its smile jagged and cruel. I took a step back, but my feet wouldn't move. I was paralyzed, trapped by the thing I had become. The figure reached out, its hand cold and lifeless. It touched my cheek, sending a jolt of ice through my body. "You're already dead," it whispered. The world around me blurred. The figure's cold hand lingered on my cheek, its touch sinking deeper, pulling the very warmth from my body. The sky above me seemed to collapse, the trees around me bending and warping into monstrous shapes. I could hear my own heartbeat, a loud, frantic thumping, but everything felt distant, as if I was no longer part of this reality. The figure's eyes bored into me, and I knew it was right. It was me, or at least it had once been me. The person I had become. I had created this shadow, this monstrous reflection, by ignoring the darkness inside of me for so long. I had lived my life hiding, pretending to be someone I wasn't, but now my reflection had come to claim what it was owed. "You've ignored me long enough," it whispered, its voice a distorted echo of my own. "Now you'll finally pay the price." I closed my eyes, tears mixing with the rain. How had it come to this? How had I let my own fears grow so powerful, so consuming? But then a voice broke through the storm, a voice that wasn't mine, yet it felt familiar. "You don't have to face this alone." I opened my eyes, my breath catching in my throat. In the distance, a figure emerged from the shadows, a figure I thought I had lost long ago. My mother. She stood there, her face filled with pain, but also with determination. She walked toward me, her presence cutting through the darkness. The shadow recoiled, its twisted form shifting as if it feared her. "You're stronger than this," my mother's voice called out, steady and strong. "Face it. Own it." The shadow screamed, its form writhing in agony, but I didn't look away. I held my mother's gaze, and in that moment, something inside me snapped. I felt the darkness within me start to break apart. The shadow wavered, its grip loosening, its form crumbling like sand slipping through my fingers. And then, just like that, it was gone. I stood there in the pouring rain, my body shaking, but I was no longer alone. I wasn't running anymore. I had faced the thing I had been hiding from, the darkness inside of me. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. But as I turned to walk away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching, waiting. Because shadows never truly disappear. They just wait for their next chance to return.